It was supposed to be the beginning of something greater, a turning point in the war against Sauron. But instead, it became the end of Middle-earth's greatest protector. High atop the peaks of Celebdil, the battle between Gandalf and the Balrog reaches its devastating conclusion. Fire and shadow clash against light and wisdom as two ancient beings, Maiar of opposite natures, unleash their full fury upon each other. The air is thick with smoke, the mountain quakes, and with one final strike, Gandalf drives his sword into the heart of Durin's Bane. The Balrog lets out a final monstrous scream as it plummets from the heights, shattering the mountainside with its ruin. But victory is fleeting. Gandalf collapses, his body broken, his spirit spent. Darkness takes him. He strays out of thought and time. But unlike in the tale we know, there is no return. In the canon story, Eru Ilúvatar intervenes. Gandalf's mission is not yet finished, and he is sent back to Middle-earth, more powerful than before, reborn as Gandalf the White. But what if that never happened? What if Eru remained silent? What if, instead of returning, Gandalf's spirit was carried away, departing to the uttermost west, leaving Middle-earth forever? This moment changes everything. The world below carries on, oblivious to the loss of its greatest ally. But one by one, the cracks begin to show, and those cracks soon turn into fractures that break the very foundation of the free people's fight against Sauron. Far below the peaks of Moria, the Fellowship is still reeling from their losses. Their journey through Khazad-dûm has already cost them dearly. First, the Watcher in the water. Then, the endless pursuit through dark halls filled with orcs. And now, their leader is gone. Aragorn stands frozen in grief, his instincts as a ranger screaming at him to run after his fallen friend, though he knows it would be in vain. Frodo, still shaken, does not speak. Legolas stares at the chasm in disbelief. Even Boromir, ever the warrior, remains silent. But the most affected of all, Gimli. For him, the loss is not just that of a guide or protector. It is the loss of a friend, one of the few who had shown him true respect. He refuses to move at first, staring into the darkness where Gandalf fell. But Moria is no place for mourning. Aragorn finally forces himself into action. Legolas, lead them on. Without Gandalf, the weight of leadership now falls on Aragorn alone. Though destined to be king, he is not yet the man he needs to be. He doubts himself. In the canon story, Gandalf's final words, "Look for my coming at first light on the 5th day. Give the Fellowship hope." But here, there is no promise of return, only silence. And that silence follows them all the way to Lothlorien. When they arrive at Caras Galadon, Galadriel already knows of Gandalf's fate. In the true story, she uses her mirror to show Frodo what is at stake, but also offers quiet guidance to Aragorn, reinforcing his path. This time her tone is far more grave. She sees what is coming. She does not tell the Fellowship that all hope is lost, but in her heart, she knows Gandalf was a crucial piece of their fragile resistance. She gifts them what she can: blades, bows, lembas, and the file of Galadriel. But her gaze lingers on Frodo longer than before. The weight of his task has grown heavier. And soon, another fracture emerges. At Amon Hen, the moment that would have set the course for the quest of the ring now unfolds in tragedy. In the original tale, when Frodo puts on the ring, Sauron's gaze finds him. But a voice calls out to him, snapping him back to himself. "Take it off! Fool! Take it off!" That voice was Gandalf. In this version, that voice never comes. Frodo hesitates for a fraction of a second longer, and that fraction is all Sauron needs. For the first time, The Dark Lord truly sees the ring. The Nazgul are summoned immediately, flying toward Amon Hen with terrifying speed. Frodo, still clutching the ring, is frozen. By the time he removes it, it is too late. From here, events unravel at terrifying speed. Boromir still falls to the Uruk-hai, defending Merry and Pippin. Aragorn, Legolas, and Gimli still give chase, but Frodo and Sam's journey has been irreversibly changed. With the eye of Sauron now fixated on their location, they are no longer wandering unseen. Instead, they are being hunted. But the disaster doesn't stop with Frodo. Elsewhere, forces are beginning to move against Rohan. In the world that Gandalf returned to, Theoden was freed from the grip of Saruman's influence just in time to rally his people. In this world, there is no such rescue. Theoden remains slumped upon his throne, a ghost of the man he once was. His son, Theodred, is still slain at the fords of Isen. His nephew, Éomer, still roams the wild, but this time he does not meet Gandalf. There is no one to convince him to return at the right moment. And so, when Saruman sends forth his armies, Rohan is caught completely unprepared. In the true timeline, Gandalf's arrival at Edoras begins a chain reaction that saves Rohan from destruction. Without him, that chain reaction never occurs. Wormtongue continues whispering poison into Theoden's ear, and the king remains a prisoner in his own mind. There is no great speech to rally the riders of Rohan. There is no exodus to Helm's Deep. Instead, when Saruman's army marches upon Rohan, they do not find warriors waiting at a fortress. They find an open city. Edoras is not Helm's Deep. It has no towering walls, no Deeping Coombe, no Hornburg. When the Uruk-hai arrive, Rohan does not have the means to resist them. By the time Theoden understands the severity of the threat, it is too late. His people flee toward the mountains, seeking safety at Dunharrow. But the Rohirrim's strength has already been shattered. The warriors who should have been preparing to fight were left without a leader for too long. And Saruman? He barely has to lift a finger. With Rohan's capital effectively neutralized, he now turns his attention southward. Gondor stands alone. By the time word reaches Minas Tirith that Rohan has fallen, Denethor is already slipping further into despair. The Palantir has poisoned his mind, feeding him only glimpses of the enemy's strength while hiding the truth. And when he hears that Theoden is lost, he resigns himself to Gondor's inevitable doom. Without Gandalf to counteract the damage, there is no spark of hope. There is no wise counsel for Faramir. There is no last-minute charge of the Rohirrim. Instead, Sauron moves unchecked, his armies descending upon a city that has already begun to crumble from within. And as all of this is happening, Frodo and Sam are running out of time. The Nazgul are closing in. The orcs are already searching for them. And soon, the ring will be within reach of its true master. With Gandalf gone, the dominoes fall faster than anyone could have imagined. Middle-earth's last chance for victory is slipping away. And as the storm of war gathers over Gondor, one thing becomes terrifyingly clear. Without Gandalf, Middle-earth is doomed. Minas Tirith stands tall against the horizon, its 7 levels stacked like a city carved from the bones of the mountain itself. But behind its white walls, all is not well. In another world, the world where Gandalf returned, hope still flickered in the streets of Gondor. The wizard's presence kept fear at bay. He rallied the city. He inspired warriors who had already resigned themselves to death. He carried a light that even the shadow feared. But in this world, that light is gone. The fall of Rohan had been swift. The riders of the Mark were scattered, their king broken, their armies never assembled. No charge at dawn to turn the tide of battle. No last stand at Helm's Deep. No reforging of ancient alliances. And so, Gondor prepares to fight alone. Denethor is slipping further into madness. The Palantir has been his only source of knowledge, feeding him visions carefully manipulated by Sauron. He has seen the endless armies of Mordor. He has seen the Nazgul rise from the shadows. He has seen his city already burning in his mind, and so he makes the worst decision possible. He gives up. Faramir, ever faithful, tries to reason with him. "Father, we must call for aid. If Rohan has fallen, then what allies remain? What of the north? What of the Rangers? We must—" "Rohan is gone," Denethor says flatly. "There is no aid coming, no great salvation. We will stand and we will fall, but we will not beg." Without Gandalf's voice of reason, Denethor descends even faster into his madness. He orders his men to prepare for battle, but his heart is already lost. He sends Faramir to the front lines, not as a strategic decision, but as a punishment. He sees his younger son as a disappointment, a pale shadow of Boromir, the son he truly loved. And so when Sauron's forces finally descend upon Minas Tirith, Faramir is among the first to fall. The Witch King of Angmar, mounted on his great fell beast, surveys the city from above. There is no sign of Gandalf the White, no force of nature standing in defiance of him. This time, nothing will stop the gate from falling. The siege of Minas Tirith begins with fire. The catapults of Mordor launch their deadly payloads into the city, and without a great leader to command them, the soldiers of Gondor falter. The morale breaks faster than it should. Some try to fight back, but the sheer numbers of Sauron's forces overwhelm them. And then the ram comes forward. Grond, a monstrous battering ram forged in the darkest pits of Mordor, its head shaped like the wolf that once devoured the moon. The orcs chant its name as they push it forward. It strikes the great gate once, twice, 3 times. The defenses hold, but they will not hold forever. If Rohan had answered the call, this would be the moment their horns echoed over the battlefield. If Gandalf had returned, this would be the moment he rode forth, staff blazing with white fire. But there is no Rohan. There is no wizard. Only the doom of Gondor. And deep in the east, another doom is unfolding. Frodo and Sam should have been slipping unnoticed into Mordor by now. They should have been past the dead marshes, past the watchful eyes of the Black Gate, finding their path through secret ways that only Gollum knew. But they are no longer unseen. The ring has been revealed. It happened at Amon Hen, where Frodo hesitated just a moment too long. In that instant, Sauron saw him. He did not know everything, not yet, but he knew enough. He knew the ring was in the lands between Gondor and Mordor, and he knew it was carried by a small, insignificant figure. It does not take long for him to put the pieces together. The reports from his spies tell him that the halflings were traveling with Aragorn, that they had been seen in Lothlorien, that they had been captured by Saruman's forces, only to escape. And so, Sauron makes his move. The Nazgul do not circle over Minas Tirith, waiting for the war to unfold. They have another mission. They have been sent to hunt. Frodo and Sam are moving through the Emyn Muil, their progress slow. Gollum, lurking in the shadows, watches them with growing impatience. He had expected to guide them, to lead them into the darkness of Mordor through the secret paths he knew. But something is wrong. There are too many orcs in the lands near the Black Gate, too many patrols, too many eyes. He does not understand why, but Sauron has already begun his search. And then the first Nazgul arrive. Frodo feels it before he sees it. A stabbing pain in his chest, a weight on his heart that makes every step more difficult. His breathing becomes ragged, his vision swims. The ring grows heavier. Sam doesn't understand at first. "What's wrong, Mr. Frodo? What's—" Then the sky darkens. A shadow passes overhead, and an unearthly screech tears through the air. The Nazgul are here. Gollum vanishes into the rocks, slipping away like a snake. He knows better than to be caught, but Frodo and Sam are not so lucky. There is nowhere to hide. The Nazgul descend. There is no rescue this time, no desperate escape down the cliffs, no days of wandering through the dead marshes. The wraiths have come, and there is nothing the hobbits can do. Frodo reaches for the phial of Galadriel, the one gift that might still give him hope, but it is too late. The ring calls to its master, and this time there is no Gandalf to fight back. The Nazgul find them before they ever reach Mordor. Their skeletal hands close around Frodo's small frame. Sam fights, of course. He throws himself at the wraiths with all the strength he has, but his sword is knocked from his hands in an instant. The last thing Frodo sees before the darkness takes him is the sky, the great winged beast carrying him away from the world he once knew. The land of the Shire is gone. The laughter of his friends is gone. The hope that the world might be saved is gone. The ring is taken, and with it, all hope dies. Far away in the depths of Barad-dûr, the Dark Lord waits. He feels the ring moving closer. He senses the moment it is lifted by hands that serve him once more. His power begins to rise again, no longer limited to shadows and whispers. For the first time in an age, Sauron will be whole. The world prepares for war, but it is already lost. There is no distraction at the Black Gate. There is no final gamble to buy Frodo time. Instead, there is only the sound of marching feet. The War of the Ring will not end in a desperate charge against impossible odds. It will not end in fire and defiance at the slopes of Mount Doom. It will end with the return of a Dark Lord in his full power. And without Gandalf to stop it, Middle-earth will fall into shadow. Forever. The Nazgul return to Mordor, their great wings slicing through the night air like knives through the fabric of the world. Their master is waiting. He has waited for this moment longer than any living thing can comprehend. In the great tower of Barad-dûr, where the dark clouds coil like serpents and the air itself trembles with malice, Sauron feels the ring drawing closer. It is no longer hidden, no longer slipping through his grasp like smoke. He does not need to search for it, does not need to whisper lies into the hearts of men. It is coming to him. The moment Frodo is brought into the great fortress of Mordor, he is no longer a hobbit. He is a vessel, a fragile thing, no more than a wisp of a creature in the presence of something vast and all-consuming. The Nazgul carry him to the Black Tower, past legions of orcs who fall silent as they pass. The stench of burning, of decay, of endless suffering chokes the air, but Frodo barely registers it. He is lost in the vastness of the ring's power, his mind unraveling as it calls to its master. The moment they place him before the Dark Throne, his mind is no longer his own. Sauron does not need words to claim him. The ring slides from Frodo's neck as if it had willed itself free. It lifts into the air, suspended in the void where Sauron's form would have been had he not been long reduced to something more terrible and less tangible. His essence surges forward, pouring into the ring like a storm being drawn back into its eye. The world shudders. The great eye blazes with renewed strength. Lightning arcs through the sky. The land of Mordor trembles as though all of it has been waiting for this moment, the return of its true master. In an instant, the Dark Lord is whole once more. Far away in the west, the free peoples feel it before they understand it. The wind changes, the air thickens. The darkness over Mordor does not shift and flicker as before. It spreads, blanketing the sky, a creeping shadow that extinguishes the sun. And then, the second wave begins. The first war, the one that was already crushing Gondor beneath its weight, was only a prelude. Now that Sauron has returned in full, the true conquest begins. The orc armies that have been battering Minas Tirith are given fresh orders. No longer do they fight simply to conquer. Now they fight to annihilate. There will be no mercy, no prisoners, no hope. The Witch King no longer takes his time, no longer toys with his prey. The gate of Minas Tirith shatters beneath Gron's final strike. The city that once stood as the pride of men is torn apart, its streets running red with the blood of its people. Denethor, already lost in madness, watches as his city burns. Without Gandalf to counter his despair, he gives into it entirely. He does not stand to fight. He does not rally his soldiers. Instead, he retreats to the tombs, dragging Faramir's unconscious body with him. And when he sets the pyre alight, there is no wizard to pull Faramir from the flames. Gondor loses its last true leader that day. The city falls, but Sauron is not finished. His reach extends beyond Minas Tirith. Across the Anduin, the armies of Mordor sweep through the land, crushing any remnants of resistance. In Rohan, the people who had fled to Dunharrow find themselves trapped. The great host of orcs and easterlings that should have been divided between multiple battlefronts is now unified under a single will, marching westward in overwhelming force. Theoden never had the chance to reclaim his strength. There was no ride of the Rohirrim, no charge at dawn, no honor left to cling to in the final hour. Instead, the last remnants of Rohan's people are surrounded, their warriors cut down, their lands burned. The Riddermark falls, and in the north, the darkness spreads as well. With the free peoples in disarray, the Easterlings and their allies descend upon the remnants of resistance, Lothlorien, Rivendell, Erebor. Without the distraction of a war waged on too many fronts, Sauron's forces begin wiping out every last sanctuary. One by one, the lights of Middle-earth go out. The Shire never learns of these events. Not fully. The hobbits there still sing their songs, still drink their ale, still carry on in blissful ignorance, until the darkness reaches their borders. Saruman, cast out of his own tower, makes his way north in the aftermath. But this time, he does not find a weakened Shire ripe for the taking. He finds the armies of Mordor already there. The war does not end in a final battle at the Black Gate. There is no desperate last stand, no final hope resting in the hands of an unseen hero. There is only the slow, unstoppable suffocation of the world beneath Sauron's will. One by one, the strongholds of resistance are crushed. The elves flee the shores, but they are too few. The dwarves retreat into their mountains, but they are not an army. The scattered survivors of Gondor and Rohan either bend the knee or are hunted down. And when the last light is snuffed out, Middle-earth enters the second darkness. The age of men never comes to pass. There are no kingdoms left to inherit, no legacies to uphold. The land becomes a shadow of what it once was, twisted, broken, enslaved. And in the heart of Mordor, where the great tower looms over the dead land, Sauron watches. He has not won a battle. He has not won a war. He has won everything. For all ages to come, Middle-earth belongs to him. There is no more resistance, no more hope. The great cities of men, the havens of the elves, the strongholds of the dwarves, one by one, they have all fallen. The world of Middle-earth has been consumed by shadow, and there is no one left to stand against it. The war is over, not with a climactic battle, not with a desperate final gambit, but with the slow, inevitable suffocation of all that was good. And it all began with a single moment. One loss, one absence that rippled outward like cracks in the foundation of a once mighty kingdom. Gandalf's return in the true timeline was not just a boon to the free peoples. It was their last chance at survival. Without him, they never had a chance. His absence did more than leave a hole in the Fellowship, it changed the course of history itself. Without Gandalf to guide them, the Fellowship fractured faster than it should have. Aragorn, uncertain of his own path, lacked the confidence to fully embrace his destiny. Theoden, left to rot under the whispers of Wormtongue, never rode to war. Gondor, weakened by Denethor's despair, never received the help it needed. And Frodo never made it. The greatest tragedy of all was not the fall of kings or the destruction of cities. It was the failure of the one chance the world had to rid itself of Sauron forever. The ring never reached Mount Doom. The quest never succeeded. And so, Sauron's power was restored. There was no great war in the end, because there was no one left to fight it. With the ring back in his grasp, Sauron no longer needed to concern himself with battles of strategy or sieges that took months to break. The armies of Mordor, once held at bay by the combined efforts of Gondor and Rohan, swept through Middle-earth like a plague. The elves of Lothlorien, still strong in their magic, resisted for a time, but even the power of Galadriel could not stop what was coming. Without allies to turn to, the Golden Wood fell. Caras Galadon, the heart of elvendom in Middle-earth, burned. In Rivendell, Elrond led the last remnants of the Noldor to the Grey Havens, hoping that some might still escape. But Sauron did not forget the wisdom and power of the half-elven lord. The ships were burned before they could set sail. There was no journey into the west. The havens themselves were taken. The last hope of the elves was gone. The dwarves, ever stubborn, withdrew deeper into their mountains. Erebor and the Iron Hills became fortresses, their halls sealed from within, their warriors ready to fight to the bitter end. But even stone cannot hold against the might of Mordor forever. When Sauron turned his gaze north, he did not send mere orcs, he sent dragons. The great beasts that had once slept in the farthest reaches of the world awoke to his call. Fire and shadow descended upon the halls of the dwarves, and one by one, their strongholds were reduced to rubble. The dwarves were wiped from history, not by orcish blades, but by the flames of the ancient terrors they had once thought long extinct. The last to fall was the Shire. For years it had been untouched, a small green land, forgotten in the chaos of war. But Sauron had seen the halflings. He knew now what they were capable of. He knew that one of them had once carried the fate of the world around his neck. And so, he made an example of them. The fields were burned, the homes torn apart. The hobbits, so small and peaceful, were enslaved or slaughtered. Those who survived were driven into the hills, hunted like animals. The Shire, once a land of peace and joy, became nothing more than another wasteland under Sauron's rule. And when it was over, when the last resistance was stamped out, when there was no more light left in the world, Sauron finally rested. He did not need to rule from a throne or sit in a great hall. He was beyond such things. He was power incarnate, and all of Middle-earth was now his dominion. But what does a world ruled by Sauron truly look like? It is not simply a world of battle and bloodshed. War, after all, is only necessary when there is opposition, and there is no longer opposition. The surviving peoples of Middle-earth live in servitude. The orcs, once mindless soldiers, become the enforcers of Sauron's will, patrolling the lands, keeping the conquered in check. Gondor's great towers are now watchtowers for the Dark Lord's empire. The fields of Rohan, once golden and bright, are now desolate and empty. There are no songs, no stories, no legends of heroes to inspire the next generation. Because there is no next generation. This is what Gandalf fought to prevent. Not just a war, not just a kingdom's fall, but the end of all that made Middle-earth worth saving. He was not just a warrior. He was not just a wise old man with a staff. He was the guiding force that made sure the free peoples had a fighting chance. Without him, their efforts were scattered and hopeless. Middle-earth was always standing on a knife's edge. Its survival was never guaranteed. It was only through the smallest of choices, the bravery of a hobbit, the wisdom of a king, the sacrifice of a friend, that it stood against the tide of darkness. And when one of those choices was taken away, when one piece of the puzzle was missing, it all collapsed. There was never a grand battle for the fate of the world. There was never a final stand against overwhelming odds. There was only silence. And in the heart of Mordor, upon the black throne of Barad-dûr, the Dark Lord Sauron ruled for all eternity.